TCI is brought to you by Forestry, sire of 43 stakes winners, including multiple Grade 1 winner Shackelford, winner of the 2012 Met Mile.
Welcome back to TCI, your inside track to the Breeders' Cup. I'm Joel Cunningham alongside Ed DeRosa. Ed, you're with us again because John's at the beach, and Ed's going to be a mainstay on a weekly basis, relying on your handicapping and analysis going into these preps for the Breeders' Cup for the next 4 months. But, you know, normally it's going to be you and I on that side sparring, you know, with our opinions. You know, I'm not going to be so much in John's role, so I'm looking forward to getting back to that. But I'm going to spar with you today a little bit because I'm sure
you'll be wrong. So yeah, I'll let you know.
We'll have a difference of opinion like always. But hey, we gave out a couple exactas last week.
Yeah, we sure did.
I'm not disappointed in that. But the Breeders' Cup is the important focus. So we start with the Win and You're In action this weekend, and we have two. You know, we have the Greenwood Cup, which is more Breeders' Cup Marathon related. So we'll probably stay away from that and maybe focus on the marathon as we get closer to the Breeders' Cup. But I think the Filly Mare Sprint with the A Gleam this weekend at 7 furlongs in California is an important one to talk about. You know, you have an interesting mix in here. Turbulent Descent is no longer a West Coast filly. She's now on the East Coast, probably going to run the Ballerina. She's going to face Musical Romance in a really good challenge there for her.
Yeah, the Steve Nash of racing, apparently.
The Steve Nash of racing,
for those who watched last week.
And that's going to be a tough test for her, man. Musical Romance, that Ballerina is shaping up nicely. I think you'll see Nicole H. and Groupie Doll. Yeah, if Groupie Doll runs in there. I think the strength is on the East Coast, but being that the Breeders' Cup is in California, tell me what you make of this A Gleam field, because, I mean, there's some quality in here.
Yeah, I think you mentioned it well with some horses with back class, including Switch, who to me is the back class is what she's relying on. It seems like she's going in the wrong direction in terms of the top of this division. But certainly Izzy Rules, I think, for me, from what we saw from her earlier this year, and no shame in losing to Turbulent Descent off the layoff. Looks like a really sharp workout back for second off the layoff. So to me, she's the filly to beat.
Yeah, and you're talking about the Desert Stormer handicap, you know, in June 17th there at Hollywood Park. I think that's going to be the key race. Most of these horses are coming out of that. You mentioned Turbulent Descent won that race and was purchased by Coolmore, is now on the East Coast. But Izzy's Rules, the runner-up, you would have to figure is where you have to start in this race. And you mentioned Switch. Here's a filly I've always liked. I liked her, you know, a couple of years ago in the Breeders' Cup Sprint. You know, she was beat fair and square there, beat fair and square last year in the Breeders' Cup Filly Mare Sprint. It does look like she's seen her better days.
Yeah, and well, she'll always be remembered for being one of the few to get as close to Zenyatta as she did. So for that, you certainly have to respect what she's capable of. But I think this is a good group. Contentious is a good word, too, because I think it's fairly deep. It's not just Izzy's Rules. You mentioned to me before we started about Teddy's Promise, and there's certainly some angles there to like.
Yeah, I think Teddy's Promise, you know, with Ron Ellis, I mean, last time out, looked like she bounced to me. I mean, if you look two back, you know, in the stakes there in May, you know, around Derby weekend, you know, she beats Rumor in a 5 furlong race, and you look at her back class, she's 4 for 7 lifetime at Hollywood Park. So she likes the track. I just think in her first run, you know, maybe in 4 months, to run that big in May, she probably bounced, is my theory, last time out the Desert Stormer. So I think from off the pace, she'll get enough speed to run at. So I think Teddy's Promise, you know, is a player in here. But again, a lot of her forms on synthetics. She'll need to be a player at the end of the year on the real dirt. Switch loves Hollywood Park. You mentioned she almost beat Zenyatta, and that was in the Lady Secret at Hollywood Park. But for her not to hit the board in the Desert Stormer last time out, that tells me that, you know, she's seen her better racing days. Another filly I think is interesting here is Ron McAnally's filly, Sugar in the Morning. Do you give her a shot at all?
I wouldn't say no shot, but to me, I think the two we discussed from the Ellis Barn and Izzy Rules are the top two. I'm a little bit interested in Baffert's filly, American Lady. He has probably 2 in here, but that's one who seemed to be thrown to the wolves last year in her stakes debut, a Grade 1 race, shipping all the way across the country. She's staying local for a summer campaign, at least for the time being. It seems like she's one he's high on. I'd love to see the workout report. If it's a good one, if they like what they've seen in the morning, she'd be one I'd probably back in the afternoon.
She's an interesting player. Lightly raced, isn't stakes accomplished yet, but like you said, they thought enough of her to ship her to New York last year, run her in the test. And look, she's 2 for 3 at Hollywood, so we know she likes that surface. So no, I'm with you there. Sugar in the Morning's a filly that I liked in the Madison at Keeneland. She looked loaded that day, but just didn't pick up her feet. So I kind of question whether or not she's good enough in this type of race. She's 1 for 3 at Hollywood Park, but a wide open group. And would it be fair to say that the winner of this race now becomes the top Filly Mare sprinter in California, at least, pointing for that sprint.
Yeah, I would say that's definitely fair, especially to me if Izzy Rules wins, because she's one I don't think has to improve to win this. Her race, I think, is good enough, where some of the others we talked about, we're definitely looking for a step forward. So to me, if Izzy Rules holds form, she's the one we'll be talking about as the West Coast hope come November.
Yeah, I agree with you. Let's switch gears now. Let's go to the East Coast.
All right.
Let's talk about the Man Award. No Gio Pani this time.
No.
Seems like the first time in like 20 years he hasn't run in this race. And, you know, I think it's a pretty uninspiring group altogether, and especially when you're talking about the Breeders' Cup, you know, in that Breeders' Cup turf picture. I'm just not sure when I look at this cast that's going to line up this weekend if we're really going to see a horse that's going to emerge from this race and be a top contender in that turf. You know, if there is one, it might be the European. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I completely agree. Treasure Beach shipped over here last year and won at Arlington in what I thought was a pretty impressive race. Right. And then had some different things going on with what O'Brien was trying to do with him. I think it was actually the Rabbit and the Arc, so clearly no shot to win that. But this is definitely a very talented colt, I think, and I'd be very surprised if he doesn't win. Maybe if he doesn't handle the shipping, then that could be an issue. But there's a few I like maybe for a sliver underneath, but he's the class and the speed for that matter.
Yeah, I think Shiv McGahee's got an interesting 4-year-old colt in here, point of entry. Just the fact that he got good at Keeneland. He's a back-to-back, you know, winner there at Keeneland. Comes in fresh now. You know, I think certainly he's a horse that could break through. Hudson Steele's a horse to me, being by Johannesburg. I think when he stretched out to 1.25 miles last time, I don't think he really appreciated the distance. So I'm not sure at 1 3/8 if he's the type of horse that can bounce back in here. What do you think?
Yeah, I think from the Pletcher barn, I think Turbo Compressor is the one who seems to be outrunning his pedigree going long.
Right.
Won the United Nations gate-to-wire fashion. I don't see Hudson Steele in that category, and I think with Treasure Beach in this race, it makes it a little tougher to win than the United Nations. So for me, I think the Dixie is the best we've seen, and 1 3/8 in a Grade 1 in New York, not for me.
Right, and then Newsdad, obviously, is a horse that at the beginning of the year, you know, looked like a horse that could make some noises in his 4-year-old year. Gulfstream had a pretty good meet there, but then totally fell apart last time out at Keeneland. What do you make of him? Is he more of a Grade 3 type to you?
Yeah, I would say on paper certainly, but with the trainer, he's always one you have to be concerned with, especially going long and just taking his time and getting him pointed to the races he wants to win. I mean, we saw it with Royal Delta. She didn't necessarily win every race last year. Lost at Tampa, lost to Havre de Grace, but when the chips were really on the table, Mott had her ready to roll. And Newsdad, to me, would be my second choice behind Treasure Beach because he has run fast enough to contend with this group and far enough. So he's my most interesting alternative to Treasure Beach.
I agree with you there, and I think Treasure Beach is where the race starts, especially if Jamie Spencer comes to ride for Aidan O'Brien. I do think this horse is a third stringer, much like, you know, last year Kate Blanco, you know, comes over and just dominates in New York. I think it could be the same thing here.
And if you're Coolmore, why not? I mean, they showed last year you come over, you win the 3 Grade 1s, and Kate Blanco was our champion, and his stablemate St. Nicholas Abbey was the one who won the Breeders' Cup. So, you know, for Eclipse Award purposes, if you have one that can run the table, and especially if you want to try to stand him over here, get some different sire lines, I commend what they're doing. It's exciting to see these horses over here.
Especially with a Win in Your In program now. I mean, to get your trip paid for, you know, if this horse were to win a race towards the end of the year in North America, get his trip paid for, I think, you know, there's some incentive there to, you know, added incentive on top of what
and we know he likes Arlington. He won there last year, so if he wins this, sets him up for the $1 million, and he's the leader in the division.
Absolutely. Let's talk about the Delaware Oaks real quick, just because it's an intriguing race. 3-year-old fillies. Who do you like in the race? Obviously starts for your big favorite, Grace Hall.
Yeah, she's the absolute horse to beat in this race, and I'm anxious to see how she runs because I think the 3-year-old filly division still wide open, whereas the 3-year-old male division, I'll have another on top, and it's going to take an extraordinary second half by Bodemeister or Painter or Hansen to usurp him. So
not Union Regs.
No, not at all. And I didn't think it would be him anyway, so not too much of a loss in my mind. But Grace Hall, seeing her come back is exciting. She's clearly a leader in the division, but she has to show it on the track in a big race, and maybe Saturday gets that going.
You know, I think she can win this race, but she needs to step up against Grade 1 competition. I look at these older mares, and I look how good they are with Royal Delta and you know, Awesome Feather, Awesome Maria. They're just much better than the 3-year-old fillies. And like you said, I like the 3-year-old colts. You know, I think they actually stack up with the older males in the
agree.
Classic division. But the Ladies Classic division, I need to see Grace Hall or one of these fillies really take a big step forward in the second half of the year. And I tell you what, Via Villaggio in here for Highlandorfer, little shades of blind luck coming over. I mean, this filly had an interesting race last time out, so I don't think it's a walkover for Grace Hall, but I expect her to win.
All right, I do too.
All right, well, Grace Hall on tap this weekend along with some other interesting action. Join us next week on TCI. We'll recap all this, and I'm going to give you a top 5 in the Filly Mare Sprint division.